the warning ignored. The Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Concordat floated majestically above the planet Nexus Prime, its crystalline walls reflecting the light of 3 distant suns. Inside, representatives from 47 different species gathered in their designated sectors, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of chirps, telepathic waves, and melodic tones that the universal translators worked tirelessly to convert into coherent discussion. Chancellor Vexlar of the Tyronen Collective stood at the central podium, his blue-scaled skin shimmering with satisfaction. The Concordat had just celebrated 500 cycles of uninterrupted peace and prosperity. Trade flourished across thousands of systems, scientific discoveries were shared freely, and conflicts were resolved through diplomatic discourse rather than violence. It was a golden age, and Vexlar took pride in being one of its guardians. The chamber's massive doors suddenly opened with an unexpected chime. All conversation ceased as every eye, sensor and perception organ turned toward the entrance. A human walked in, flanked by 2 Concordat security officers who looked distinctly uncomfortable with their assignment. The human was a woman of medium height with dark hair pulled back in a practical style, wearing a simple gray suit that seemed almost primitive compared to the elaborate robes and biological displays of the other delegates. She carried a data case that pulsed with a faint red light. Vexlar's inner eyelids flickered with annoyance. Humans had been granted provisional observer status only 20 cycles ago, and already they were disrupting formal proceedings. The species was known throughout the galaxy for their unusual psychology. They saw danger everywhere, prepared for conflicts that never materialized, and possessed an almost pathological inability to simply relax and enjoy the peace that civilization offered. The Tyronen had a word for such beings in their ancient language, though the translation was imprecise. The closest equivalent in human terms would be paranoid warmongers. The woman approached the speaking circle without waiting for formal invitation, her footsteps echoing in the suddenly silent chamber. Vexlar noticed that despite the attention of thousands of beings, she showed no signs of the intimidation or reverence that usually accompanied such moments. Her expression was grim, determined. Chancellor Vexlar, the human, spoke, her voice amplified by the chamber's acoustic systems. "My name is Dr. Sarah Chin, Special Envoy from the Terran Scientific Union. I apologize for this interruption, but I bring urgent information that cannot wait for scheduled diplomatic channels. The Council must hear what I have discovered." Vexlar's scales darkened slightly, a sign of irritation among his people. "Dr. Chin, there are protocols for such presentations. You should have submitted your findings through the proper departments for review and scheduling. This Council has important matters to discuss. Your dramatic entrance is most irregular. There won't be a council to discuss anything if you don't listen to me right now." Sarah's voice carried an edge that made several nearby delegates shift uncomfortably. "I've spent the last 8 cycles investigating anomalies in the outer reaches. Energy signatures that don't match any known phenomenon, entire asteroid fields that have been molecularly disassembled, and radiation patterns that appear in ancient archaeological records from extinct civilizations." She activated her data case and holographic projections filled the air above the council floor. Images of dead worlds appeared, their surfaces stripped down to bare rock. Mathematical equations scrolled past, followed by spectroscopic analyses and historical records that dated back millions of cycles. The presentation was thorough, detailed, and deeply disturbing. "What you're seeing is evidence of the Void Plague," Sarah continued, her eyes scanning the assembled delegates. "That's what the ancient Korthan civilization called it before they were wiped out 3.2 million cycles ago. It's not a disease in the traditional sense. It's a self-replicating nanotech swarm that operates at the quantum level. Once it reaches critical mass in a system, it consumes everything. Organic matter, metals, even the atmosphere itself. It breaks everything down into base elements and uses the energy to create more of itself." The chamber remained silent, but Vexlar could sense the emotional state of the other delegates through the Concordat's empathic network. Confusion, yes, but also skepticism and growing annoyance. This was exactly the kind of fear-spreading that humans were known for. "Dr. Chin," spoke Ambassador Quellen of the Sarati Communion, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, "we appreciate your concern, but surely you're not suggesting that we face an extinction-level threat that no one else has detected? Our sensor networks span the entire Concordat. We would have noticed something of this magnitude. You haven't noticed because you're not looking in the right places or using the right detection methods." Sarah's frustration was becoming visible now, her hands clenching at her sides. "The Void Plague doesn't register on standard scans because it operates below the threshold of conventional sensors. You need specialized quantum resonance equipment to even detect its presence, and by the time it becomes visible to normal instruments, it's already too late. She manipulated the hologram, zooming in on a particular data set. 3 months ago, the mining colony on Theta Carini 7 went silent. Your official reports listed it as a communications failure. 2 months ago, the agricultural world of Blessed Meadows stopped all transmissions. Your explanation was an unexpected solar storm. Last month, the research station orbiting Pinnacle 4 simply vanished from all sensors. No debris, no distress calls, nothing. You classified it as a navigational database error. Sarah turned to face Chancellor Vexlar directly. Those weren't accidents or equipment failures. That was the void plague, methodically consuming everything in those locations. And according to my projections, if we don't act now, the swarm will reach critical mass within 6 cycles. Once that happens, it will spread exponentially. Your entire Concordat will be consumed within a standard cycle, maybe less. The emotional network of the Concordat suddenly flooded with alarm from several delegates, but Vexlar raised his hand for silence. Dr. Chin, even if we were to accept your theory at face value, what exactly are you proposing? That we evacuate the entire Concordat based on human paranoia and coincidental equipment failures? I'm proposing that you listen to the species that actually studies these things. Sarah's voice rose, echoing through the chamber. Humanity didn't grow up in your perfect, peaceful Concordat. We evolved on a death world where everything from the bacteria to the weather tried to kill us. We had to develop pattern recognition, threat assessment, and contingency planning just to survive to the space age. We see dangers that you've trained yourselves to ignore because you've lived in safety for so long. She activated another image, this one showing Earth's history. Wars, natural disasters, extinction events that humanity had survived through adaptation and determination. The primitive brutality of it made several delegates look away, but Sarah pressed on. We're not warmongers or paranoids. We're survivors. And we're telling you that the patterns we're seeing match historical records of previous extinction events going back millions of cycles. The Corthan civilization, the Eternal Assembly, the Harmonious Collective, dozens of advanced societies that simply vanished from the galactic record. They all fell to the same threat, and they all ignored the warnings until it was too late. Vexlar felt the mood of the council shifting. Some delegates were beginning to show genuine concern, accessing the historical records Sarah had provided. But others, particularly the elder species who had shaped the Concordat's philosophy of peace and cooperation, radiated dismissal and something else. Fear not of the void plague but of what accepting Sarah's warnings would mean. It would mean acknowledging that the universe was not as safe as they believed, that their peaceful civilization existed in a bubble that could pop at any moment. The vote was called. 47 species cast their judgment. Should the Concordat mobilize emergency resources to investigate and potentially combat Dr. Chen's theoretical threat? Should they allow humanity's military specialists and their disturbing weapons technology into Concordat space? Should they accept that their philosophy of peace might be insufficient to protect them from a universe that didn't care about their ideals? 41 species voted no. Only 6 voted yes, mostly younger civilizations that still remembered what it was like to struggle for survival. Chancellor Vexlar delivered the verdict with what he hoped was diplomatic grace. Dr. Chin, the Concordat appreciates your concern, but we cannot mobilize our entire civilization based on speculation and ancient history. We have investigated the incidents you mentioned and found mundane explanations for each. What you perceive as a pattern is simply the confirmation bias that plagued your species. You see threats because you expect to see threats. He paused, letting his next words carry the weight of finality. Furthermore, this council has become concerned about humanity's influence on Concordat space. Your militaristic culture, your constant preparation for conflicts that never materialize, your inability to embrace the peace we have built, these things are incompatible with our values. Therefore, by majority vote, humanity is hereby expelled from Concordat space. You have 30 cycles to remove all human presence from our territory. Any human vessels found within our borders after that time will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. Sarah stood frozen, her face cycling through disbelief, anger, and finally resignation. You're making a mistake that will cost billions of lives, she said quietly. When the void plague comes, and it will come, you won't be ready. You don't have the weapons, the technology, or the mindset to fight it. And by the time you realize that, it will be too late. We appreciate your warning, Dr. Chin, Vexlar replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. But the Concordat has survived for millennia without human assistance. We will continue to do so. Please escort our guest to her ship. Sarah left without another word, her data case still pulsing its red warning that no one wanted to see. The council chambers slowly returned to normal, delegates resuming their discussions of trade agreements and cultural exchanges. Within an hour, the whole incident was being reframed as an unfortunate but necessary decision. Humanity was simply too different, too damaged by their violent evolution to ever truly fit into civilized society. 3 cycles later, the first confirmed cases of the Void Plague appeared in Concordat space. An entire colony world consumed in hours. Then another. Then 5 more in a single rotation. The mathematical progression was exactly as Sarah Chen had predicted, but by then all human vessels had withdrawn beyond Concordat borders, taking their warnings and their weapons with them. Chancellor Vexlar stood in the same chamber where he had dismissed the human envoy, watching red icons multiply across the holographic map of Concordat space. Each icon represented billions of lives, entire civilizations reduced to molecular dust by a threat they had refused to acknowledge. His scales had turned pale gray, the color of mourning and shame among his people. In the growing darkness, one thought repeated endlessly in his mind: humanity had been right, and they had made the species that could have saved them into exiles. Now the price of that arrogance was coming due, and there was no one left to pay it but themselves. The price of arrogance. The emergency command center on Nexus Prime had become a tomb of flickering lights and desperate transmissions. Chancellor Vexlar stood before the massive tactical display, watching in real time as another system fell to the Void Plague. The holographic map that had once shown the proud expanse of the Concordat now resembled a diseased organism, red infection spreading from world to world with terrifying efficiency. 14 cycles had passed since the first confirmed outbreak. In that time, the Void Plague had consumed 23 colony worlds, 16 mining stations, and countless vessels that had been unfortunate enough to encounter the swarm. The death toll had exceeded 200 billion souls, and the numbers climbed with each passing rotation. Military Commander Thrascore of the Unified Defense Fleet materialized his holographic presence beside Vexlar. The Cronin warrior's 4 arms hung limp at his sides, his normally proud battle stance reduced to exhausted defeat. Chancellor, we've lost another battle group at the Meridian defense line. The swarm adapted to our weapons within minutes. Particle beams, plasma torpedoes, quantum disruptors. Nothing works for more than a few engagements before they evolve countermeasures. Vexlar's scales had lost all color, turning a dull gray that matched the despair in his hearts. How many ships did we lose this time? All of them. Thrascore's voice carried a hollow quality that Vexlar had never heard from the veteran commander. 300 vessels. 20,000 crew members. They bought us perhaps 6 hours before the swarm reaches the sanctuary cluster. After that, it's a direct route to the core worlds. The Chancellor turned away from the display, unable to watch another system icon turn red. Around the command center, specialists from dozens of species worked frantically at their stations, trying to find some weakness in the Void Plague, some pattern they could exploit. But the truth was becoming impossible to ignore. The Concordat had built its entire civilization on the assumption that the universe was fundamentally peaceful, that conflicts could be resolved through dialogue and understanding. They had no weapons designed for this kind of threat, no strategic doctrine for facing an enemy that couldn't be reasoned with, and no experience with the kind of desperate, total warfare that survival demanded. The human had tried to tell them. Dr. Sarah Chen had stood in the Grand Council chamber and warned them this would happen. She had offered assistance, technology, and the benefit of humanity's painful evolution on a world that had taught them to see and prepare for dangers before they became extinction events. And the Concordat had responded by exiling them, by choosing comfortable denial over uncomfortable truth. Chancellor, a voice called from across the command center. It was Ambassador Quellen, the Sarah T whose musical voice had questioned Sarah's warnings all those cycles ago. Now that voice was fractured with grief and exhaustion. We're receiving a transmission on the old diplomatic channels. It's encoded with human protocols. Vexlar felt something stir in his chest, a dangerous thing he tried to suppress. Hope was cruel when it was almost certainly misplaced. Put it through, he ordered. The main display shifted and a human face appeared. It wasn't Dr. Chin, but a man with silver hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. He wore a dark military uniform covered in insignias that meant nothing to Vexlar, but the weight of command was unmistakable. Behind him, the bridge of a warship bustled with controlled activity. This is Admiral Marcus Reed of the Terran Defense Initiative, the human said, his voice carrying authority that filled the command center. We've been monitoring your situation from outside Concordat space. We know what you're facing. We know you're losing. And despite everything, despite the fact that you expelled us and threatened to destroy any human vessel that crossed your borders, we're prepared to offer assistance." The command center fell silent. Every being present turned to stare at the display, unable to process what they were hearing. The species they had exiled was offering to help them, even after being cast out as warmongers and threats to civilized society. "What?" Vexlar asked, the question escaping before he could stop it. "Why would you help us after what we did?" Admiral Reed's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Because Dr. Chin was my sister," he said quietly. "And before she died trying to get anyone in the galactic community to listen to her warnings, she made me promise something. She made me promise that when the Void Plague came, when civilization started falling, we would help anyway. Not because you deserve it. Not because you treated us fairly. But because that's what humans do. We save people even when those people have made it very clear they don't want us around." The weight of those words settled over the command center like a physical thing. Vexlar felt shame burn through him, a sensation so intense his scales actually darkened from the heat his body generated. "Dr. Chin is dead?" "Cancer," Reed replied. "The aggressive kind. She spent her last 8 months trying to warn you, pushing herself past what her doctors recommended, using every connection she had to get someone in the Concordat to listen. The stress and travel made her condition worse. She died 3 cycles after you expelled humanity from your space." His jaw tightened. "She never stopped believing you could be saved, even when you made it clear you didn't want salvation from the likes of us." Commander Thrace stepped forward, his warrior instincts cutting through the emotional weight of the moment. "Admiral, if you have the capability to fight the Void Plague, we need that assistance immediately. The swarm is advancing on our core worlds. We estimate complete civilization collapse within 20 cycles, maybe less." Reed nodded. "We have the capability. Humanity has spent the last 500 cycles doing what we do best, preparing for the worst. When we were exiled, we didn't waste time being bitter. We studied every piece of data Sarah gathered about the Void Plague. We developed weapons specifically designed to combat self-replicating nanotech swarms. We built ships that can operate in quantum flux environments where the swarm is most active. And we trained for this exact scenario." He leaned forward and his expression hardened. "But we're not doing this for free, and we're not doing it on your terms anymore. You want our help? Then you accept our conditions. All of them. Non-negotiable." Vexlar felt the attention of every delegate in the command center focus on him. The decision that came next would define the Concordat's future, assuming they had one. "What are your terms, Admiral?" First, Reed began, you grant humanity full membership in the Galactic Concordat, not observer status, not provisional access, but complete equality with every other species. Second, you allow us to establish military bases in strategic locations throughout Concordat space. Third, you agree to mandatory defensive training programs for all member species. No more pretending the universe is safe because you wish it to be. And fourth, he paused, his eyes boring into Vexlar's, you publicly acknowledge that Dr. Sarah Chin was right, that her warnings could have prevented this catastrophe, and that her death was the result of your pride and refusal to listen. The command center erupted in debate. Some delegates protested the terms as too harsh, an exploitation of their desperate situation. Others argued they had no choice, that pride was a luxury they could no longer afford. Ambassador Quellen's musical voice rose above the chaos, surprising everyone present. "We accept," she announced, her form shimmering with determination. "All terms without reservation. Dr. Chin tried to save us and we responded by casting out her entire species. If the price of our survival is admitting that shame, then it's a price we should pay gladly." She turned to Vexlar. "Chancellor, I move for an immediate vote on Admiral Reed's conditions." The vote was swift and unanimous. 47 species agreed to humanity's terms without a single dissenting voice. The threat of extinction had a way of clarifying priorities and stripping away the comfortable lies civilizations told themselves about their own enlightenment. Admiral Reed nodded. "Good. We're transmitting coordinates for fleet rendezvous points throughout your territory. Our forces will begin arriving within the next rotation. In the meantime, I'm sending you tactical data on the Void Plague's behavior patterns and the weapon systems we've developed to combat it." The data package arrived instantly, flooding Concordat systems with information that was simultaneously terrifying and hopeful. Humanity had developed quantum resonance bombs that could disrupt the swarm's collective intelligence. They had created ships with adaptive armor that could resist molecular disassembly. They had even designed biological agents that could introduce errors into the plague's replication process, causing it to consume itself. But the most striking element of the human strategy wasn't the weapons or the technology. It was the tactical doctrine. Every battle plan, every engagement scenario, every strategic analysis was built on a single assumption that no Concordat species had ever truly embraced. Some battles required sacrifice. Some victories demanded that good people die so that others might live. Humanity had spent their entire evolution learning that lesson on a world that showed no mercy to the weak or the naive. The first human fleet arrived 6 rotations later. Vexlar watched from Nexus Prime as 300 vessels dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of system space. They were unlike anything in the Concordat arsenal, angular and purposeful, built for war in a way that made them seem almost alive with hostile intent. But there was beauty in that purpose, the beauty of something designed to do exactly one thing and do it supremely well. Admiral Reed's flagship, the Defiant, led the formation. Vexlar established a direct comm link, his scales cycling through colors as he struggled to find the right words. "Admiral, on behalf of the Galactic Concordat, I want to thank you for coming. I want to apologize for how we treated your people and Dr. Chin. And I want to say that we were wrong. About everything." Reed's image appeared on the screen, and for the first time, the Admiral's stern expression softened slightly. "Chancellor, you can thank us by surviving. You can apologize by learning from this. And you can prove you were wrong by building a better civilization when this is over, one that listens when people bring warnings you don't want to hear." The battle that followed would be recorded in history as the turning point of the Void Plague War. Human ships engaged the swarm at quantum levels, their weapons tearing apart the nanotech's collective intelligence, while Concordat forces, trained and equipped with human technology, held defensive positions that would have been impossible just cycles before. The fight was brutal and costly. Humanity lost 73 ships and thousands of crew members in that single engagement. But when the quantum resonance bombs detonated in perfect synchronization, the Void Plague's advance stopped for the first time since the outbreak began. It took another 40 cycles to fully eliminate the threat. 40 cycles of constant warfare, of losses and victories measured in the survival of populations rather than the preservation of territory. The Concordat learned what humanity had always known, that the universe was not inherently peaceful, that survival sometimes demanded sacrifice, and that the price of ignorance was always paid in the blood of the innocent. When the last Void Plague signature finally vanished from sensor arrays, Chancellor Vexlar stood in the rebuilt Grand Council chamber. The new chamber was different from its predecessor, designed not just for peaceful debate but for rapid crisis response. Human advisors worked alongside Concordat officials, teaching them the skills that had allowed humanity to survive everything their death world and the hostile galaxy had thrown at them. A monument now stood outside the chamber's entrance. It depicted Dr. Sarah Chin, her likeness carved from stone quarried from 47 different Concordat worlds. The inscription read simply, "She warned us. We did not listen. 600 billion souls paid the price of our arrogance. Never again." Admiral Reed attended the unveiling ceremony, standing at attention as species after species paid tribute to his sister's memory. When Vexlar approached him afterward, the Admiral's eyes were wet with tears he didn't bother to hide. "She would have been proud," Vexlar said quietly. "You kept your promise to her." Reed shook his head. "I kept my promise, but she deserved better than this. She deserved to see the Concordat accept humanity as equals, to know that her work wasn't in vain. Instead, she died thinking she had failed." "She didn't fail," Vexlar replied, his scales shifting to the color of honor and respect among his people. "She was just ahead of her time. And now, because of her and because of you, the Concordat will never make that mistake again. We will listen to the warnings. We will prepare for the threats. We will honor the wisdom of those who see dangers we are too comfortable to acknowledge." The Admiral looked at the monument, at his sister's face frozen in stone, and nodded slowly. "Then make sure you mean it, Chancellor. Because the universe is full of threats like the Void Plague, and the next time humanity might not be around to save you." Years later, when historians analyzed the Void Plague War, they identified the moment of exile as the critical failure point. If the Concordat had listened to Dr. Sarah Chin, if they had accepted humanity's warnings and assistance, the death toll would have been measured in thousands rather than hundreds of billions. But they had chosen pride over wisdom, comfort over truth, and paid a price that would echo through generations. The Concordat that emerged from the ashes was different. Stronger, wiser, and forever marked by the knowledge that their enlightened peace had been an illusion, a luxury afforded by blind luck rather than any inherent virtue. They had driven humanity away, ignored their warnings, and discovered too late that sometimes the species you dismiss as paranoid warmongers are simply the ones who understand that survival requires vigilance, preparation, and the courage to face uncomfortable truths. The consequences of their arrogance had arrived exactly as predicted. And in surviving them, the Concordat learned the hardest lesson of all, that sometimes the price of wisdom is paid in the blood of those who should have lived to see it learned.